Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com. The United Nations claims that the Greenland ice sheet has been melting for the past 25 years. In this video, I'm going to discuss the junk science behind that claim. Every year, a lot more snow falls on the surface of Greenland than melts. This graph shows the surface mass balance of Greenland, which is the difference between snow accumulation and snow melt. From 1981 to 2010, Greenland's surface gained an average of 370 billion tons of ice every year. And for 5 out of the last 7 years, the gain has been above the 1981 to 2010 average. But all of this excess snow has to go somewhere. The snow piles up and forms glaciers. These glaciers are rivers of ice which flow downhill towards the ocean. And when these glaciers reach the ocean, climate alarmists take pictures of them and claim they're evidence of global warming. But reality is the exact opposite. The glaciers calving off into the sea is evidence of excess snow in the interior. When these glaciers calve off, they form icebergs like the one which sank the Titanic in 1912. If a glacier is retreating, climate alarmists say it's evidence of global warming. And if the glacier is advancing towards the sea, climate alarmists also claim that's evidence of global warming. No matter what the glacier does, climate alarmists will claim it is evidence of global warming. Claiming that a glacier calving is evidence of global warming would be equivalent to claiming that a huge waterfall is evidence of a drought. It makes absolutely no sense. Now let's take a look specifically at where this fake United Nations news comes from. Graphs like these purport to show a net loss of ice mass on the Greenland ice sheet. They're based on gravity measurements from satellites. Now I'm going to show you why these measurements are not reliable. This graph is from the Danish Meteorological Institute, and they include this text with the graph. They say the GRACE satellites measure the total changes in ice mass. This is not true. What they measure is total changes in gravity. A lot of things can change the gravity over time at a specific location on Earth. I'll be discussing these in a minute. But the key thing from this description is at the end of the sentence. Changes in mass illustrated here have not been corrected for changes in mass due to glacial isostatic adjustment. And that's what makes the graph meaningless. A study done in 2010 explained why you can't measure changes in ice sheets based on gravity without correcting for the glacial isostatic adjustment. The problem is that you have to know what the Earth is doing underneath the ice sheet because that has a huge effect on the gravity. The ice sheets form a very thin layer sitting on top of the Earth's crust, and the Earth's crust is floating on the mantle. The rock underneath the ice sheet has a lot more effect on gravity than the thin ice sheet itself. During the last ice age, Canada was covered with ice, but all that's left of this ice sheet is what remains in Greenland. The surface mass balance of Canada during the last ice age was very positive. More snow was falling every year than melting. Water from the ocean was moving to the land surface. This caused sea level to drop about 120 meters or 400 feet. The drop in sea level allowed people to walk across the Bering Strait from Siberia to Alaska. And Florida was much larger at that time when sea level was 400 feet lower. 20,000 years ago, Canada was covered with ice, and this affected the Earth's crust. The weight of the ice depressed the Earth's crust underneath Canada. But it's like pushing down on a water balloon. In Canada, the Earth's crust was depressed, but it caused the crust to rise in surrounding areas like the east coast of North America and Greenland. But when the ice melted over Canada, the opposite occurred. Canada's crust started rising up, while the crust of the east coast of North America and Greenland started falling. Sea level at Churchill, Canada appears to be falling very rapidly, but what's actually going on is that the land is rising. The land at Churchill, Canada has risen nearly 1 meter over the last 80 years. This is caused by glacial rebound due to the ice sheet melting. But the opposite thing is occurring along the east coast of North America. The land there is sinking. This creates the appearance of sea level rising in New York when what's actually going on is that the land is sinking. And the land underneath the Greenland ice sheet is sinking as well due to the loss of ice in Canada. This causes a reduction in the gravity measured by satellites over the Greenland ice sheet, which has nothing to do with the Greenland ice sheet itself. And that's why you can't measure changes in ice mass over the ice sheet without correcting for the glacial isostatic adjustment. What this graph is actually measuring is the land sinking underneath the Greenland ice sheet and has little or nothing to do with the ice sheet itself. But the problem with using gravity to measure ice sheets is much more fundamental than that. If the ice sheet is getting thicker, it displaces an equal mass of land underneath it. So theoretically, there would be no change in the gravity as the ice sheet gets thicker. If you gain 1 billion tons of ice, you're going to lose 1 billion tons of earth underneath the ice sheet. And when the ice is melting, the opposite occurs. If you lose 1 billion tons of ice, you're going to gain 1 billion tons of rock underneath the ice sheet. So there shouldn't be any change in the gravity. In other words, you can't measure changes in ice sheets by using gravity measurements. The technique is fundamentally flawed. This really, really bad science enables the United Nations to make fake news and propaganda like this article. And then they use this propaganda to generate superstition about the use of fossil fuels affecting the Greenland ice sheet. But the reality is that for 5 of the last 7 years, the surface of the Greenland ice sheet has gained excess mass above the 1981 to 2010 average. In other words, the Greenland ice sheet is not melting down as climate alarmists claim. Just since September 1st, the surface of the Greenland ice sheet has gained more than 100 billion tons of snow and ice. But for some reason, the United Nations and the press are not talking about this huge increase in mass. Reality doesn't suit the needs of their propaganda and superstition. Toto's been pulling back the curtain on this junk science and superstition for the past 14 years. You can visit him, Kyrie, Caesar, Toki, and Upala on the web at realclimatescience.com.